The restaurant was fully booked. That was the only reason they came to her house instead. One small change, one redirected plan. And God used it, because that is how God works sometimes. Not with thunder, with a fully booked restaurant, and a doorbell, and a wife, standing in a doorway looking at her husband and the woman beside him. She did not scream, she did not cry, she did not slam the door. She looked at them for exactly 1 second, and then she said, "Good evening, Ma. Please come in, stay with me until the very end. Because this is not just a story about a man who cheated. This is a story about what God does when he has seen enough." Her name was Ngozi Was. She had been married to Emeka for 6 years. They had 2 children, a daughter named Adaeze, who was 7, a son named Chidi, who was 4. Ngozi was not a complicated woman. She believed in 3 things completely: God, family, work, in that order. She had been working as a domestic manager for a wealthy household in Lekki for 3 years. She cooked, she supervised, she organized, she made sure everything in that household ran the way it was supposed to run. Her employer was a woman named Linda Okonkwo. Linda was 34 years old, beautiful, well-dressed, the kind of woman who wore clothes like they had been made specifically for her body. Linda ran a fashion boutique on the island. She was kind to Ngozi in the professional way of someone who valued efficiency more than warmth. But she was fair. She paid on time. She gave bonuses at Christmas. She never raised her voice. Ngozi had no complaints about her employer. None at all. Linda's husband was a man named Mr. Okonkwo. He owned a manufacturing company. He was rarely home during the day. Ngozi knew his name from documents. She knew his face from a family photo on the wall of the study. She had never connected Mr. Okonkwo Manufacturing to the company where her husband worked, because her husband had never mentioned the name of his employer, and she had never thought to ask. Well Emeka had been working at Okonkwo Manufacturing for 4 years. Production supervisor, steady salary, enough. He was charming, he dressed well, he laughed easily. He had a way of entering a room that made people notice him. He had met Linda at an industry dinner that Okonkwo Manufacturing had sponsored 8 months ago. Not at the company, at the event. He did not know she was his boss's wife. She had introduced herself only as Linda. She had not mentioned her husband. He had not asked. By the time he understood who she was, 4 months had already passed, and he had made a choice that should have ended everything. Instead, he told himself he would end it quietly, before anyone found out. He had been telling himself this for 4 months. That Friday evening, Emeka and Linda had planned to go to a restaurant in Victoria Island, a new place that had opened recently. Linda had made a reservation. Emeka told Ngozi he had a team dinner. She was in the kitchen when he said it. She was cooking for the children. She looked up. "Okay, don't be too late." He left. He picked up Linda from a meeting point 2 streets from the office. She got into his car. She kissed his cheek. He drove toward the restaurant. They arrived. The hostess at the entrance looked at his name. She checked the system. She said, "I'm sorry, sir. There seems to have been a system error with the reservation. We do not have you listed for this evening." Linda's expression changed. She said, "That's impossible. I booked this 3 days ago." The hostess apologized again. "We are fully booked tonight." "I'm so sorry." Linda exhaled. She said, "Fine. We'll go to mine." Emeka said, "Are you sure?" She said, "It's fine. I'll tell my girl to prepare something quickly." She called ahead. She told Ngozi to prepare dinner for 2. Ngozi said, "Yes, ma." "What time?" Linda said, "An hour." Ngozi said, "Yes, ma." She hung up. She began preparing. She did not know who the guest was. Linda did not mention a name. They arrived at the estate at exactly 7:45. Emeka parked. They walked to the entrance of the building together. Linda's hand linked through his arm. The easy, familiar way of 2 people who have been doing this for months. The lift took them to the 4th floor. They walked to the door. Linda pressed the bell. They stood together in the corridor. Emeka's jacket was slightly open. Linda's hand was still in his arm. They were talking about something. Laughing slightly. The door opened, and Ngozi was standing there, in her work uniform, looking at them. The world did not stop. The generator from across the estate kept humming. Somewhere below a car horn sounded. Emeka's face went through everything in approximately 1 second. Recognition. Aura. The specific cold sensation of understanding that God has just arranged something. His hand came away from Linda's arm so fast that Linda noticed. She frowned. She looked at him. He could not speak. Ngozi looked at her husband. 1 second. She looked at Linda. 1 second. She looked at her husband again. Something crossed her face. Not anger. Not tears. The specific expression of a woman receiving an answer she had not known she was waiting for. Then she stepped back from the door. She looked at Linda. She smiled. "Good evening, Ma. Please come in." She stepped aside and held the door. Linda walked in, still frowning slightly at Emeka. Emeka walked in behind her. He could not look at Ngozi as he passed. She closed the door. She went back to the kitchen. The food needed checking. She served the food. That was her job. She carried the plates from the kitchen to the dining table. She set everything the way Linda preferred. She poured the drinks. Linda sat at the head of the table. Emeka sat across from her. He could not eat. He moved things around his plate. Linda noticed. She said, "You're quiet tonight," he said. "Just tired," she said. "The drive probably," he said. "Yes." Ngozi came to the table to refill the water. She moved around the table from Linda's side to Emeka's side. She refilled his glass. He did not look at her. She did not look at him. She went back to the kitchen. Linda said, "Ngozi's cooking is excellent. You should try the stew." Emeka picked up his fork. He said, "Yes, it's very good." He said it like a man stepping carefully across broken ground. Because he was. Midway through the dinner, Emeka excused himself. He said he was going to the bathroom. He walked past the bathroom. He went to the kitchen. Ngozi was at the sink. He said her name. She did not turn. He said it again. She turned off the tap. She did not turn around. He said, "Ngozi, please, let me explain." She turned. She looked at him. Her voice was very quiet, very controlled. She said, "There is nothing to explain." He said, "Please just listen to me." She said, "Emeka, I am at work. This is my place of work. And Nana, you are sitting in my employer's dining room. She is my madam. If I make a scene here, I will lose my job." He stared at her. She said, "Go back to the table. We will talk when I get home," he said. "Ngozi, this is not what." She raised one hand quietly. "The way a person raises a hand to stop something that is already too late to stop," she said. "Please, do not make me lose my job. Go back." He looked at his wife, standing in another woman's kitchen, in her work uniform, asking him not to cost her her job. He went back. After Emeka returned to the dining room, Ngozi stood at the kitchen sink. She put both hands on the edge. She breathed. Something was happening in her body that she could not stop. Not nausea exactly. The physical sensation of grief arriving before the mind has fully processed the reason for it. She had known something was wrong for months. The late nights. The guarded phone. The way he answered questions with questions. She had told herself she was imagining things. She had managed it the way she managed everything. Quietly. Without making it a problem. Now she understood she had not been imagining anything. She had simply been choosing. And the thing she had been choosing not to see had just opened the door for her. She straightened. She wiped her hands on the cloth. She walked to the dining room doorway. She said, "Madam?" Linda looked up. Ngozi said, "I am so sorry. I am not feeling well this evening. Can I please go home? The table is set. Everything is covered. I will make up the time next week." Linda looked at her with concern. She said, "Are you okay, Ngozi?" Ngozi smiled. "Just a headache. It came suddenly." "I am sorry to leave early," Linda said. "Of course. Go and rest." Ngozi said, "Thank you, Ma." She looked at the table briefly. Her eyes moved across Emeka the way you move across furniture. Without stopping, she went back to the kitchen. She collected her bag. She walked to the front door. She let herself out. She closed the door behind her. She stood on the landing for 30 seconds. She breathed in. She breathed out. She walked to the lift. She went home. She arrived home at 9:15. The children were asleep. She checked on them. She stood at their doorway for a moment. Adai is asleep with one arm outside the blanket. Chidi curled on his side the way he had slept since he was a baby. She went to her bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed. She did not cry. Not yet. She sat with both hands in her lap. She looked at the wardrobe. Then she stood. She pulled out 2 large bags. She packed carefully. Her clothes. The children's clothes. Her documents. The children's documents. Important papers from the drawer she had always managed. Birth certificates. Her work contract. The household accounts book she had kept for 6 years. She moved quietly and deliberately. The way she did everything. She wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter. It said only, "I know." She woke Adaze gently. She told her they were going to grandmother's house. Adaze asked, "Is Daddy coming?" Ngozi said, "No. Daddy is busy." She carried Chidi without waking him. She called a taxi. She loaded the bags. She helped Adaze into the back seat. She closed the door. She left. Emeka arrived home at 11:40. He opened the door. He called her name. Nothing. He checked the bedroom, half the wardrobe empty. He checked the children's room. The beds were still warm from where they had been lying. He stood in the middle of his daughter's room. He stood there for a long time. Then he saw the note on the kitchen counter. He read it. 2 words. "I know." He sat down on the kitchen floor. He sat there until 2 in the morning. He drove to her mother's compound the next morning. He knocked. Her mother opened the gate. She looked at him the way a woman looks at someone she has been waiting to see in this exact state. He said, "Please, I need to speak to Ngozi." Her mother said, "She does not want to speak to you." He said, "Please, just 5 minutes." Her 3 brothers appeared. The oldest one said, "She told us everything." He said, "I just want to talk." The brother said, "You need to leave." He said, "Please, I am her husband." The brother stepped forward. He said quietly, "If you come back here again, you will not like what you find. I am telling you this one time." Emeka looked at the gate. He saw Ngozi briefly at the window behind the curtain. She saw him. She moved away. He drove home. The papers came 3 weeks later. Delivered to the apartment. He called her. She did not answer. He called again. She sent a message. "Please use the lawyer's contact." She had organized everything before she left. The way she organized everything. Carefully. Without making noise. He signed the papers 4 months later. She got the children. He paid child support. She remained in a small apartment near her mother, funded by her savings and her salary. He remained in the apartment they had shared. The rent, without her 50%, was the full amount. He paid it. The food without her management was more expensive than he expected. He paid that too. He had not understood how much she had been managing. Until she stopped managing it. He continued seeing Linda. She filled the gap. For a while, 6 months after the divorce, Okonkwo Manufacturing began having problems. A policy change, 2 lost contracts, restructuring. Mr. Okonkwo called a meeting. He spoke about difficult decisions. Emeka sat in that meeting and felt the coldness of a man who already knows what is coming. The layoffs began with middle management. Emeka was called in on a Thursday morning. Mr. Okonkwo was professional about it. He said it was not personal. He said there would be a month of severance. Emeka walked out with his box. He sat in the company car park for 40 minutes. Then he went home. 2 weeks after losing his job, Linda called him. She said, "We need to talk." He went to see her. She said, "I spoke to someone who knows you." He waited. She said, "You were married when we met." He said, "We are divorced now." She said, "You were married when I met you." He said, "Yes." She looked at him. She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" He had no answer that would help. She said, "I need you to stop coming here," he said. "Linda?" She said, "Please." He left. He drove home. The apartment felt like a space from which everything meaningful had already been removed. Because it had. He found a new job. Smaller company, lower salary. He paid rent for the first month. He missed the second. He paid a partial third. He was evicted on a Tuesday. He packed his car. He called 2 friends. Both had reasons they could not help. He spent 2 nights in his car. On the 3rd morning he had 1 place left to go. He drove to Ngozi's mother's compound. He parked outside. He sat in the car. Then he knocked. Her youngest brother answered. Emeka said, "I am not here to cause trouble. I just need to speak to Ngozi." "Please." The brother closed the gate. He heard voices. Then the gate opened again. Ngozi was standing there. She looked at him. He looked different from the man who had stood at this gate months ago. Smaller somehow. Not in height. In the specific way that people become smaller when things have been removed from them. She stepped back. She said, "Come in." They sat in the small yard. Her brother stood at a distance. Emeka looked at his hands for a long time. Then he said, "I am not here to ask for anything." She waited. He said, "I just came to tell you that I understand now, what you were doing, what you were carrying, how much I was not paying attention to." She said nothing. He said, "I lost the job. I lost Linda. I was evicted 3 days ago. I have been sleeping in my car." She looked at him. Not with satisfaction, not with cruelty. The specific expression of a woman who already knew because she saw things coming before they arrived. She always had. He said, "I am not asking to come back. I know what I did. I know nothing changes it. I just wanted to say I am sorry, properly, to your face." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I accept your apology." He nodded. He started to stand. She said, "Sit down." He sat. She looked at him carefully. Then she said, "You cannot stay here," he said. "I know," she said. "Your parents are in the village. You have a room there. I will give you money for the transport and something small to start again from there. You will at least have shelter." He looked at her. He said, "You don't have to do that." She said, "I know." She went inside. She came back with an envelope. She held it out. He took it. He opened his mouth. She said, "Go well, Emeka. Take care of yourself." She turned and went back inside. The gate closed. He stood outside with the envelope. He got in his car. He drove east toward the village, toward his parents, toward whatever God had left for him after everything else was gone. God does not sleep. This is not a saying. It is a testimony. Emeka had a wife who paid 50% of everything, who cooked before work and after work, who raised his children with both hands, who stood in a doorway and saw her husband with another woman and said, "Good evening, Ma. Please come in," because she was at work, and her dignity was not something he could take from her. Even then, he did not lose everything in one moment. He lost it the way careless people lose things, slowly, by not paying attention, until everything he had taken for granted was gone: the job, the woman, the apartment, the children who now woke up in their grandmother's compound, and he was sleeping in his car. And she gave him transport money and told him to go well. That is not foolishness. That is the specific grace of a woman who has made peace with what happened, and chosen not to carry bitterness on top of everything else she has already carried. If you have been faithful, present, paying half of everything quietly, without making it a speech, God has been watching, and God does not sleep. Like and subscribe for more African tales every week on Folktale Globe. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Ngozi did the right thing at the end, when she gave him the money, or should she have done differently? I want to hear from you.